What's up, everybody? Mr. 100K a day here in the flesh, and very briefly here on the biggest hater track and field sports betting and gambling. I'm going to be asking a question. Do you guys think people like Blessing Okagbare and other drug cheats are victims in track and field, or the track and field as a whole are victims? Or do you think everybody is a criminal or should be punished equally because they're involved in a conspiracy to get better in performance and get better at track and field and using performance enhancing drugs? At the recent sentencing of Eric Lira, when Mr. Lira got busted, he got Blessing Okagbare busted. Remember, Blessing Okagbare ran 10.63. She was running very fast. It was wind dated from Nigeria in 2021. She got busted very soon thereafter. And so when the indictment came down and Eric got busted and he just got sentenced early this year, he only got 3 months in prison. But during his sentencing, and this is the court document, guys, during his sentencing, one of the main things that came up was were there any victims in the case? And the government was looking for prison time, and they felt like this was a crime that had victims. So let me read you guys what it said. This is what the government was saying, the prosecutor. This simply wasn't a one-time thing. Mr. Lira was operating a serious drug doping operation that involved multiple athletes from multiple countries. He traveled to multiple states and provided multiple forms of enhancing drugs over a period of months. And of course, he did all this under the guise of being a medical professional, which of course he's not. He's not licensed to practice medicine anywhere, certainly not in any of those states that he traveled to and in the course of the scheme. And Your Honor, while there are no specific victims listed in the PSR, the government would argue to the court that to view all athletes who participate in international sporting events as victims in this case. Mr. Lira was giving drugs and gave certain athletes an unfair advantage in these kinds of competitions. And the government also believes that the court should consider people who look to the Olympics as a source of hope and inspiration. Illegal conduct like the defendant served only to further taint the Olympics, the way that the Russian doping scandals and other doping scandals that we've seen. In terms of deterrence, Your Honor, as the court knows and the government has said many times, this is the first prosecution and conviction under the Rodchenkov Act. So the court has an important role here in showing that violating the act has serious consequences, including potentially the loss of one's liberty. So the court has a real opportunity here to send a message to all would-be dopers that your liberty is at stake and you may end up in jail if you get caught for doping athletes in international competitions. And it's especially important to send that message this year, Your Honor, because the Olympic Games are coming up again this summer in Paris. And I think now is when people are certainly preparing for those games. So this was the government, guys. They were going over and over again. They were going over just back and forth about what they were going back and forth about what type of sentence this guy should get and if this is victim. So is track and field as a whole victimized, or since everybody's cheating, should it not be should it not be a big issue? I don't know. Just tell me what you think. But aside from all that, because I got a little distracted, I want to know, because that was the government's position, and this is what his lawyer responded and said. He said, "This is what the lawyer responded. His lawyer responded and said, Your Honor, I'd like to start with letting the court know that I think I did not put my sentencing submission that when Mr. Lira was arrested, it was at the port of entry in El Paso, because that's where his clinic is in Mexico. He was arrested there and he was interviewed by FBI agent that's there. And he agreed to be interviewed. He waived his right to counsel. He waived his right to remain silent. He was interviewed. And not only that, he gave them permission to have full access to his phone which had all of the message, all the WhatsApp messages. I'm not sure if it's WhatsApp or WhatsApp, but the electronic message with various people, including Athlete One. Athlete One, of course, is Blessing Okagbare. That's who sent them to prison. The reason I pointed out, Your Honor, is because among other things, I don't know if the court is aware of this, if it is not a fact that existed yet when I wrote my sentence submission, but the government has obtained a second indictment in this district that's CR 23-623 against two other individuals with whom Mr. Lira had communications. And I wanted the court to know that those messages were on his phone that he willingly gave to the government Those are overt acts in this indictment. So Mr. Lira is not getting any kind of formal credit for that under 5K or anything like that. But I wanted the court to recognize that that is his openness and his cooperativeness not only led to his own ultimate plea. We had some legal arguments to make, of course, anti-delegation clause, but it not only led to his own conviction, but is leading to the arrest and indictment of others that were involved in, Your Honor. I think that's a significant, Your Honor. So he said that, boom, he basically saying that they got stuff out of his phone. He wanted to get credit for snitching, but he didn't get the credit for snitching, which is what 5K is. But the judge asked about the stage of those cases and things like that. So going on, his lawyer also said, and this is, I think, the important part, and talking about as far as how much prison time he should get. So he said the statute, I believe the court knows, just remind you, it was written so that the athletes themselves cannot be prosecuted. So the athletes under this statute cannot be prosecuted. This is a statute that he was charged with that targets people who actually are distributing drugs, like Mr. Lira. We all know who Mr. Lira is. He's a fake clinician, guys giving just performance enhancing drugs to athletes, and he got prosecuted under this particular statute. This seems very odd to me. I understand there's international political issues involved that are way above my head, but when you see in the Olympics, you see a 15-year-old skater that tests dirty for performance enhancing substances, you can see her as a victim. You can see some countries where it is the policy, or it's the policy that athletes engage in whatever they need to do, or you gave them advantages. This case involves athlete number one. And I want to tell you a little bit about athlete number one. Talking about Mrs. Okagbare, guys. So make sure y'all listening to this very clearly. I'm only saying that because everybody knows athlete number one is who athlete number one is at this point. Miss Okagbare went to college at the University of Texas at El Paso, where Mr. Lira went to college. She's a little bit younger than he is. Mr. Lira, was also on the track team when he was in school, not nearly as successful as she was. His degree was in kinesiology, so in the course of pursuing his degree, he worked with athletes. And he got to know her 10 years before the events in this indictment. They have a close relationship. They had a close relationship. And I'm not saying it was intimate or romantic relationship, but it was a very close relationship. And the government knows this from looking through text message and WhatsApp message between them. It's not uncommon for them to use loving words to each other. And I pulled up a text message just to see. They talk about being happy and love you, dear, smile. And what Mr. Lira says to her on one day in the time period of this is, she says, love you too, Eric. There's conversations back and forth about whether, one is mad at the other. And if you didn't know that, you might think they were in a romantic relationship, but they were just very good friends, Your Honor. Why I think that's important is because that's the person. And let me tell you too, she was about 32 years old at the time, which is generally past an athlete's peak. She's an amazing runner, but at a time in her life where she was not doing as well as she used to do, she asked Mr. Lira for help. She asked him to get certain substances. Certain substances. There is a website. I think it's something like superhuman.com or superbody.com. There is a website where you can purchase these things. Mr. Lira, a couple of things about the substances. It was human growth hormone, mostly something the judge interrupted. There were 4 or 5 substances, as I recall. And his lawyer continued, there were, but I think the 2 ones perhaps mostly involved with the specific acts in the indictment was something called EPO, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it, and human growth hormone. One that Mr. Lira, who had a clinic in Mexico, those substances do not require prescriptions in Mexico. Those are things that he could, and I won't say prescribe because they didn't require a prescription. They were over the counter, dispensed. The judge interrupted, said dispense. Yes, he could dispense in Mexico. That doesn't mean he could dispense them here, which is ultimately what ended up happening. Those substances were available on his website, and the judge interrupted and said, so does that mean that when all of this is over and the supervisor release is done, he's going to go back to Mexico and continue to do this? This was the judge asked, y'all, and his lawyer was like, no. The court was like, okay. But his lawyer was like, but I'm going to get to that because I think this is a good question. That is a good question, a very valid concern and a valid question. But more important, your question of does the difference between probation and incarceration affect the answer to that question? My point in mentioning it really is More that just it did not seem as insidious to Mr. Lira, who would give substance like this to somebody who is not an Olympic athlete who may want growth hormone for some other purpose. And the judge said this, what about the other athletes? And they said they were friends of Miss Okabare's actually. And the judge said one was from Switzerland, and I recall one was from, I don't remember where the third one's from, Great Britain, Your Honor. Okay. Then the lawyer said, and of course, y'all know who the one from Great Britain was. That's one of the people that got popped on that relay, I believe. Mr. Lira did not have an independent. Yes, he came to know them, and he came to message with them, but he met them through Miss Okagbare. And the judge says they were introduced by Miss Okagbare, and the lawyer was like, "Yes, she did. Yes, yes." And she said, "Can you help my friends too?" I mean, they were her friends. They are her friends. He did not try to get other people to order things. He was not in the business of that. But perhaps, more importantly, he didn't make any money doing this. There was no profit here. And you can see if you go through the messages, he says, okay, the website is charging me $265, and she sends the $265 by Zelle to him. I think pretty clearly she wanted him to get the orders from the website. She could have done that herself, but then her name would be on it. So it was more a matter of putting his name out there on that. So that's her name. So the judge says, so that her name wasn't on it? Yes, the lawyer says. He says, Your Honor, I'm not diminishing his responsibility for what he did. I led off with saying he knew he was helping her cheat. And the judge says, and he knew it was wrong. And he knew it was wrong. This is what the lawyer said. I mean, cheating is always wrong, whether you're cheating in a marriage or cheating in a sporting event or cheating by breaking the law. It's wrong to cheat. Although I have to say, it is the athlete who takes the oath. When they agree to compete, they take an oath not to use controlled substances. And that's why Mr. Lira has never stepped away from what he did in this case. And I've never on his behalf. I just have an issue with the statute, and I know that's a dead issue. So it's kind of interesting what they're saying. They're arguing back and forth about this, about what is cheating in track. I mean, this is in the federal courtroom about Blessing Okagbare and saying how Mr. Lira is neither a coach and he held himself out as a doctor, all these things. They're basically saying that track and field as a whole and sports as a whole is a victim in these types of things. And Blessing Okagbare, he didn't get paid for it. Blessing Okagbare basically went down over this and how it destroys the sport when these types of things happen. So he just got sentenced early this year, in April. This is at his sentencing hearing, the transcripts from it, and he ended up getting 3 months in prison. So we all know that Blessing Okagbare ran great that year in 2021 when she got popped. Eric Lira was riding with her. People got indicted. Other people got indicted behind this, not just Eric. And it turned into an ugly situation. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that track and field as a whole is a victim? Other athletes are victims? Or since everybody's cheating or a majority of people cheating, should track and field not be considered to be a victim in this case? Because I feel like he shouldn't have gotten prison time, and I feel like you can't expect great performances from humans without certain drugs. I think the drugs themselves, the use of them in sports should be okay, because I feel like the human body breaks down very, very quickly, and with the pounding that you're doing on the body, it's very easy to get injured. So tell me what you guys think about Blessing Okagbare, Eric Lira in this situation and the testimony before the court. He even said, his lawyer even came and said, hey, Your Honor, this girl was 32 years old. She was washed up. She had nothing going for herself. This man, she came to this man. He didn't make no money from it and ended up taking him down because she got popped. At what point, do we stop blaming the distributor? Do we blame the athletes and the culture itself of how drugs are distributed within the sport? So I don't know, y'all. Tell me what y'all think. These court documents are extremely important. I feel like they tell a lot of information in it. And I think that ultimately, it's for you to decide who should be responsible or who the victim is in these situations. Tell me what y'all think, y'all. Peace.